Good morning, students. This is the first video on history, and you know that I would like to pay more attention to the content of it. Now, we are not starting with the first chapter of this book, which I think is purely and purely about archaeology, and that is the first chapter from the beginning of time, and it needs a greater amount of concentration. And this chapter can only be taught in class, not on a video, because there are a lot of things that I'll have to show on the board to make you understand. So, coming to the second chapter, that is writing and city life. Now, yes, it appears to be a very basic thing, that is writing and city life. Why should it be there in class 11 chapter? So, uh, let me make it complicated. Okay. Now, writing. Why? If I have to ask you, had you been in class, I would have asked you, why do we write? Why is there a need to write? I'm sure most of you would tell me, sir, we do writing because we want to communicate. Okay? But now, communication can also be done by talking, something which the prehistoric man had been doing for thousands of years, right? But he still felt that at some point in time, as the society and the structure of the society got more and more complex, there was a need. Okay, because you have to understand, which you have, I'm sure you have studied. We start with hunters, and then we became food gatherers, and then we went into farming. So naturally, when we were hunters, we were hardly 10 or 15 people living together. And then when we got into farming, then at least then our villages got bigger in size. We were not moved because when we were doing farming, there was a land that needed to be taken care of. There was a land that needed to be uh, uh, you had to sow crops on those lands, which had to be taken care of. So naturally, now gradually, our habit of moving from one land to another and one part of the geography to the other part, that gradually started slowing down, and we started settling in. And once we started settling in, the whole life became much more complicated. It was not as simple when we were just hunters and gatherers of food from, and we would consume whatever we could find. Now, so there was a need to make things. We had to document now things, that because now there was some kind of a loose state structure. There was now some kind of an administration that had started taking shape, and we had to record, we had to make rules, we had to make certain laws. So those things needed documentation. Okay, so and that is the reason why writing happened. Otherwise, we had always been communicating with each other. A human being always felt the need to communicate, because but before we get into writing, students, then when we talk about this, then I'll have to also take you back before. What was there before writing? Okay, what was there before writing? Now, you'd be surprised to know, actually, man had been communicating with each other or even with himself. He always felt that need, because and how do we know that? And how do we know that? Because he was expressing himself through cave paintings. Once his we are talking about thousands of years ago. Once his hunting was done when the sun was setting, so naturally he did not have anywhere else to go. He would go inside the caves where he used to take shelter, right? We are talking about thousands of years ago. So once he was inside his caves, or his family was inside his caves, that's what he used to do. He still wanted to express himself, and he used to make sketch. He used to use the burnt charcoal and draw certain things, draw things, sketches of animals, draw sketches of humans, and that's how he was expressing himself. He wanted to he still, even then, he wanted to document the life that he was leading, right? He was keen to let let the future generation, if you can say, if he thought it that way, but he wanted to document it, that is what it was. For him it was kind of a diary writing. Okay, there are some very very famous, I would just like to mention some very very famous cave paintings which archaeologists have found, which are thousands of years old. One of the very prominent one, especially in the islands around Indonesia. You know, some of them that we have found, especially in the island of Borneo, there is a whole cave painting which is dated to 45,000 years, which really dates back to 45,000 years. Some historians say it could even be 50,000 years from today. It could be that old. And there is then again you have an island of Sulawesi. I'm sure you geography students must be aware of it. That also is in Indonesia. The paintings that have been found and the cave sketches that have been found again date back to around 40,000 years. And of course then you have the very famous, if you talk about in the main European context of it, in Europe itself, you have Spanish paintings, which Altamira in Spain, that also goes back to about 20,000 years. Then you have very famous cave painting of Lascaux, which is again 17,000 years, right? So man has been trying to express himself, for himself, for his brethren, but he has been doing it. And then at some point in time, he of course wanted to. He started talking. Then languages evolved. Uh, where rather than just sign and then just some confused blabbering, he started actually documenting it and standardizing as to what everyone was saying. Then the languages evolved. Right now, writing is a very, very recent invention of man. Okay, you cannot call it a discovery because he invented it. Uh, he could have, he talking was definitely nature's gift to him. He could do it because he has tongue, he had mouth, so he could do it. But writing is clearly his own masterful invention. If you actually see it, it's one of very beautiful inventions. Okay, now writing is something which has very recent origin, just about some historians put it at 3,500 years before Christ. Some would like to put it around 4,000 or 500 years before Christ, because writing is considered to be and but let me tell you one very important thing. Our findings about writing is that man came up with writing is mainly again about what has been carved on the tablets, what has been written on the stone, and that's how we kind of calculate that yes, writing, we have records of writing which started happening probably 4,100 years before Christ or 4,500 years before Christ. But it is also possible, let me just kind of put a thought in your heads, but it is also possible that man had started writing on stuff which was perishable. Probably he straight away did not start writing in tablets and started graving and engraving the stones with whatever came into his head with about writing. Probably he was using leaves to write it. Probably he was using the barks of the tree to write something, which definitely was very very perishable, and it is all gone. It would not be standing the test of time or the vagaries of nature like stone would, right? So whether man straight away started engraving things whatever came to his head when it came to languages on the stones, I really doubt it. you know Probably he started even today. There are, if you go to the museums of India, whether in Calcutta, if you go to the National Museum, go to the museum in Delhi, some of the very famous ones that I'm talking about, you would see a whole amount of manuscript which is on the barks of the trees, on leaves. They have been very gently preserved and very so clearly, probably man started doing it before that, right? Now, coming to now to about if you see this chapter is now where did writing evolve. Now most of the historians agree that writing evolved in the areas around present day uh, Iraq and Iran. Okay, that is known as Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia, in a lot of terms, is considered to be the cradle of world civilization, because Mesopotamia has given a lot of firsts to the world, as per the historians. Okay, now let us not talk about what we have in our impressions about our own great figures, and which mythical figures like Sri Ram or Sri Krishna and all of them, which we date back to hundreds and thousands of years. But when you have to talk about history in terms of real evidence, world history, then it is considered to be Mesopotamia, because for one very important reason, uh, uh, Mesopotamians were, even today, the people of that part of the world are very, very smart, intelligent. Okay, and Mesopotamia, because it had a unique gift. Okay, the areas around Mesopotamia had a unique gift whereby two major rivers, that is Tigris and Euphrates. Okay, um, I wish I could have drawn it on the board and showed you how they flow, but then please Google it. You would see that they would come from, they both these rivers take birth in the mountains of Turkey, eastern part of Turkey, and both of them then go into they run start running parallel to each other, and then a few hundred kilometers right before they actually get into sea, that is in the going to sea, that is in Persian Gulf. Both these rivers, that is Tigris and Euphrates, meet each other in in the area of Shat al Arab. Okay, that's where they meet, and ultimately they go into Persian Gulf, the sea. Now, a whole new civilization was born around these two rivers, that is Tigris and Euphrates. And naturally, when hundreds and thousands of people started living in these areas, naturally they had to write, because the situation was, it needed administration. When hundreds and thousands of people are living, you have to make laws, you have to formulate structures, you have to build institution. Now then it cannot be just about someone says something and someone says something and someone said something, and then it got misinterpreted into something else, and then by the time people understood it, it was completely something else. Okay, so all that needed had to be documented, and one, because the society was getting more and more complex. So as so that's where there was an urgent need that was felt to write and document things, and we believe, the historians believe, that it started in the Sumerian areas, the Mesopotamian civilization, that is known as the area or around Sumer. These areas were known as Sumer, so the areas around Sumer, and whether you call, and both are same thing. It's the Sumerian civilization, some people call it, and some people call it Mesopotamian civilization. And we shall continue in the next videos. Thank you.